How are we? Welcome back, a lot of you. I haven't seen you. Some of you I saw, some I haven't seen, so welcome back. Welcome back. Where's your parents?
They're on their way.
All right, good. All right. So we are week 2 into the new year, right? Week 2?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right, fantastic. Last week was the first weekend? All right, cool. All right, well, I have a lot, so I won't chit-chat because I have a lot of stuff that we want to cover, and kind of excited about it. So I'm going to ask everybody to turn to Genesis chapter 33. And I'm going to read the first 16 verses of chapter 33 from a different translation. I want you to follow along in your Bible and notice if there's anything that's like different in yours. You see a word that's different, a word that's changed. There will be some Hebrew words in here which might confuse you a little bit. That's okay. I'm just going to keep going. So if you can follow along. That's going to be really hot. So Genesis chapter 33, verses 1 through 16. Got your Bibles open, everybody? I'm waiting for Claire to open her Bible.
You'll be here all
I know. Is it Malachi, then Genesis, or something like that? No. All right, Genesis 33, here we go. And Yaakov lifted his eyes and looked and saw Esau coming, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. And he put the female servants and their children in front, and Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. And he himself passed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" And he said, "The children with whom Elohim has favored your servant." Then the female servants came near, they and their children, and bowed themselves. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed themselves. And Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed themselves. Then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "To find favor in the eyes of my master." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours." And Yaakov said, "No, please. If I have now found favor in your eyes, then receive my present from my hand, because I have seen your face like seeing the face of Elohim. And you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because Elohim has favored me, and because I have all I need." And he urged him, and he took it. And he said, "Let us depart and go, and let me go before you." But he said to him, my master knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them too hard for one day, all the flocks shall die. Please let my master go before his servant, and let me lead on slowly according to the pace of the livestock that go before me, and according to the pace of the children, until I come to my master in Seir. And Esau said, "Please, let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "Why this? Let me find favor in the eyes of my master." And Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. So as you were following along, or as you read this last week, or as you were going through this, as you were taking notes, I was wondering, did you find anything odd in that passage? Did you find any patterns in that passage? Why are you looking at me like that? Was there anything in there that stood out to you, like, oh, wait a sec, this is odd. Why is this happening? Why am I seeing this? Like, I'll give you a hint. How many times does Jacob bow down to Esau? 7 times. Are numbers important, as we've been learning? No, not important at all, right? No, they are important, right? It's interesting. So he bows down 7 times. Then his servants come out, the servants' wives come out, and what do? They bow. And then Leah and her kids come out, and what do? And then Rachel comes out with her kids, and what do? They bow. So there's a 3. If you remember the Genesis passage, we saw 7s and 3s popping out everywhere, right? Then, as I was reading, how many times does Jacob say to Esau, my master? You are my master. Close. No, he doesn't say that. He says it 5 times. How many times does he say to Esau, I am your servant? 2. 5 and 2 makes 7, right? So 7s and 3s are popping out in a lot of places here, right? There's something happening. So as you're reading the story, and as we've been learning through reading all these, right? When there's all of these numbers that are bouncing off and like starting to match up, what are we supposed to be doing at this point? What? Where's my calculator? No. We're supposed to be not paying attention, but also asking questions. Clearly, there's something that's trying to be said here. There's something that we're supposed to be grasping. What is the story here? Because too often, we just breeze through these numbers, we breeze through the story, and we're like, oh, this is cool, they bowed down, and they bowed down, and then we move on, and we miss the big point of what is actually happening in the story. And so we have to ask the question, and realize there's probably something bigger going on here. And so if you have these written down, I had been writing these down as I was going through this, but I had 5 questions that I wanted to address tonight. One was, why is Jacob bowing down to Esau? Why does he call him my master? I'm your servant. Why does he do this? The second question I had is, why does Jacob say Esau's face looks like the face of God? I mean, that popped out. Number 3 was, why does Jacob change the language, say, take my gift, take my present, to take my blessing? In the same phrase, same sentence, he changes the language. The fourth questions I had was he said, please take this stuff back. I don't need all this stuff. He says, no, I want you to have it. I have, in different translations, said enough, or another translation, everything. And in my translation I read, says, I had everything that I need. So keep what I'm giving you. It was an interesting statement. And the fifth question I had was, well, if you remember the story, which we're going to talk about, this happens right after what? Immediately preceding this story, what did we just see?
He wrestled with God.
A wrestling match, right? Who the heck is he wrestling with? Who is this person, or, whatever this is that he's wrestling with all night long, that he ends up with a limp? So I wanted to set up the story and go back and look at this a little bit deeper. And so, starting in Genesis chapter 32, if we back up just a little bit, I'll give just a synopsis a little bit. Chapter 32, this is where Jacob is finally leaving Laban. He's left this place, and he's finally coming home. And he sends messengers to his brother to say what? I'm home. I'm coming home. And these messengers come back to Jacob. And what do they tell Jacob? Oh, we told your brother, and he's coming with 400 men. And it says, he was greatly afraid and distressed. And as I thought about this, I just watched this the other day, and I thought, this is probably how he felt. If we can play it. Hold on. There it goes. Volume. Technical difficulties, hang on.
Did you act it out for us?
I thought about it. But then I was like, my wife's coming tonight. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe not. Yes, nay? Maybe? One more time. The sound is not working. Go ahead, play it till... oh, wait.
What movie is this?
Guardians of the Galaxy. Are we going to try to play it? All right, never mind. It was going to be perfect. It was a great setup, but it's just not going to work tonight. All right.
Well, what happened?
So, Guardians of the Galaxy, right? They have the stone, they take it to the guy that they're going to sell it to, and he starts taking it apart, and he's telling them that this stone, you know, if held by certain people, can destroy all kinds of planets if in the wrong hands. And he's showing them pictures of all these people dying and planets being destroyed. And Star-Lord says, I think I peed myself right now, right? I can only imagine as Jacob is sitting there and his messengers come back and say, there's 400 soldiers coming here, right? When the Bible says he was greatly afraid and distressed, I can see him saying, I think I might have peed myself right now, right? The fear was just overwhelming. And so it's at this moment that we probably should be reminding ourselves why. Why would he be afraid? What was the last thing Esau said in the story of Genesis that we read about Esau before Jacob left town? What did Esau say? I'm going to kill that blankety blankety blank, right? That's what he said. I am going to look to kill him. As soon as my dad's dead, he's dead, right? And why? Why was Esau so mad? He stole not only his birthright, the most important thing, what did he steal? His blessing, right? He stole his blessing. He dressed up like Esau, and he stole his blessing. Because why? What did he do? He deceived his dad, right? Genesis 39 or 32, 9 through 11 goes on. And he says, if you have this on the screen, and Jacob said, O God, my father, Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, Jehovah, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all these deeds of steadfast love and of faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. And I have a different translation here, because if you remember, what is steadfast love typically translated in Hebrew? Chesed, right? Because of all the deeds of your chesed, I've recognized as I was in this foreign land the chesed that you've given me and all the truth, which was interesting. Is it doesn't translate that in the ESV. It translates it as faithfulness, but the word is emet, is truth. All the truth that you have shown me. Last week was an important reminder. If you remember last week, right, we set this whole story up because last week was about justice, right? And it talked about who Jacob was, right? And the idea of what justice came from this idea that he was, what type of character was he? What type of person was he at home? Jacob means what? Deceiver, right? And what did he do? He lived a life of deception. And then finally that deception came back to him and woke him up and realized, this is who I am. This is what I've been doing. He then, going back to the story, he then separates, he realizes Esau's coming, so he separates all these people, sends groups up and forward, and he sends these kids in forward, and he sends these groups in. Why? So in case one group gets attacked, what can the rest do? They can all flee in different directions, right? So he's preparing himself. What?
That's awful.
That he sends yeah.
You send them up by what?
Order of how much I like you?
Well, I mean, he keeps Rachel at the end, yes. But right in front of Rachel is Leah, and then the other maids before her, right? And then, so there's a hierarchy here, unfortunately, right?
Sad.
It is kind of sad. But he separates them.
Kind of sad.
That's why my face looked like that when this started. You're
This is horrible.
I'm like, oh, he's a dirtbag.
You still a dirtbag.
Hang on.
He is.
We got to keep it in culture, in context here, right? I mean, there was a hierarchy back then, there was not this idea of what we have today he has multiple wives and multiple servant wives, right? So it's clearly a different culture, right? So there's a hierarchy here that makes sense within the context of the story. But let's go on. We digress, right? Chapter 32, verse 22, right, is where we get to this weird story. We get to this really weird wrestling match. We're supposed to ask, who's the stranger? Who's this? Yeah, good question. Hey, well done. Way to be thinking ahead. Who's the stranger? The stranger and he, they wrestle until the break of dawn, and Jacob refuses to let the stranger go. For whatever reason, the stranger can't get him off him, right? And just holds on and holds on and holds on and says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Which this is an interesting thing, because how does the stranger then bless him? Does he bless him with money? Does he bless, may you have power, may you have wealth, may you have prosperity? Does he bless him with long life? Does he bless him with multiple children? Does he bless him with peace in your life? What does he bless him with? A new name. And not just a new name that means something, I'm going to name you prince or king or power. He names him Yisrael, which means what? One who struggles with God and who struggles with man. What a weird blessing, right? Who wants to have a new name that says you're going to struggle with God and you're going to struggle with man? No, who wants that name? That's the blessing that he gets. Okay, I'll bless you. Here's your blessing, right? This is just an odd story. This is an odd message. This is an odd blessing. It doesn't make sense on the surface. But then here comes Esau. Here comes Esau with 400 men. And we are looking at the story, if we're wondering, if we're watching this as a movie, and we don't know the end yet. Unfortunately, we've read the whole story. But if you're watching a movie, and you see this brotherly conflict that has been happening since birth, since the womb, there's been a brotherly conflict. Since the womb, they have had these issues. They've been at odds with each other. One's always been trying to outsmart the other. One's always trying to steal this from the other. One's always doing these things. And they have this conflict. And the last time they see each other, he says, I can't wait to kill you. Right? And the brother comes home, and this conflict is still there. 400 soldiers are bearing down. You're waiting for this to happen. You're watching the movie. Who's going to win? Brother against brother. They're about to do battle, maybe to the death. How is this going to end up? If we think of the context of the story of the wrestling match, he should have confidence, right? Because he just got blessed with this idea. You will wrestle with man and you will prevail. You will wrestle with God and you'll prevail. So he shouldn't really be scared, should he? Yet he kind of maybe peed himself a little bit. I mean, really, what does Jacob have to be afraid of? Who is Esau? Who's the Esau that he knows, that he's always known? The story that we've read, we know that Esau is somebody who's a little hasty. He's a little hot-tempered. He's a physical person, likes to fight. He's a hunter. He's a great hunter. He's a violent person, maybe a warrior even. Jacob is none of these things. But what does Esau do when he sees Jacob? He embraces him. He hugs him. What else does he do? He kisses his neck and he weeps on him. I mean, this is not what we were expecting if we were watching a movie. It's kind of like this is anticlimactic. Like, wait a second, what just, I was waiting for a battle, right? Where's the anger? Where's the frustration? Where's the animosity? Where's the threat to revenge? Like, I want to take this guy down. Where is all of that? You weep and you kiss him and you hug him like. But now we have a picture a little bit more of who Esau is, the character of who Esau is. Esau is an impulsive person who lives in the moment. He's quick to anger, but he's also quick to forgive, quick to forget the past. It's over. You think about this. And then in the story, right after that, we have this role reversal of Jacob. Why is Jacob bowing? Why is he calling him my master? Why is he calling himself, I am your servant? Why does he change the language from take my present to take my blessing? Because if we remember from last week, we recognize, or I should say he recognizes, these weren't his. The blessing wasn't his. The blessing of you, your brother will serve you, wasn't his blessing. It was his brother's blessing. It was for Esau. If you noticed in this story, throughout this whole story, there was 3 themes. There was the idea, and you can't see this in the Hebrew, but there's this word penayim in Hebrew, which is faces. There's faces throughout this whole story, right? He called, I saw the face of God. I saw Esau, the face of God. And there's these places that he names, penayim, there's faces everywhere. There's also names, and there's also blessings. These 3 themes are always about identity. The identity of who you are, your physical being, who you are inside, your character, and they're about your destiny, who you will become. There was an interesting quote that I read as I was doing the study, and it was from a psychologist named René Girard, who says that the root of violence comes from the wish to have what someone else has. In essence, you desire to be someone else. He calls it mimetic desire. This was Jacob's life. From the wrestling in the womb to grabbing the heel of Esau when they were being delivered, to outwitting Esau, to stealing his blessing, to telling his dad, I'm Esau, I'm dressed in his clothes, I feel like Esau. This is who Jacob was. This was his whole life. Jacob wanted to be Esau. Why? Why would he want his whole life to be like Esau? One, because Esau was everything that Jacob was not. Esau was the firstborn. In the womb, they wrestled, and they had this issue, and when he was born, it says that he was, what did it say? He was covered in hair. When Esau was born, he was covered in hair. The idea behind that is that he was fully made. Esau was strong. He had tons of energy. He was a skilled hunter, and most importantly, what probably was the biggest deal for Jacob, was that he was loved by his father. Esau was a force of nature to Jacob. It took Jacob 20 years to realize the chesed of God that we just showed and the truth that God gave him. It took him 20 years to realize. But it's really the truth in the wrestling match that night that changes Jacob's life forever. Jacob battles with the truth. Who am I? Who am I? The man who longed to be Esau all his life, or the man called to a different destiny, to a different purpose? He says, I will not let you go until you bless me. So he gives him a new name. The stranger says, in the past you struggled to be Esau. In the future you will struggle not to be Esau, but to be yourself. Instead of holding on to Esau's heel, you will hold on to God. You will not let go of him, and he will not let go of you. Now let go of Esau so you can be free to hold on to God. And the next day, that's exactly what he did. He let go. Which explains the Genesis 33 passage. He says, please accept my blessing that is brought to you because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have enough. The Hebrew word there is kol. Does anybody remember what kol means? Huh? Close. Whole. I am whole now. I'm complete. We finally realize at this point in the story, we don't need anyone else's blessing. We only need our own blessing. That's the meaning of the priestly blessing from the Numbers 20 or the Numbers 6 passage. May God turn his face to you and grant you peace. Peace comes when we see our reflection in the face of God and let go of the desire to be someone else. For so many years, I struggled with trying to figure out who I was and worrying about what other people thought about me, worrying about measuring up to what I was supposed to be, looking at people and trying to see I need to be better than that person, or I need to be as good as that person, because if I'm not, I won't be good enough. For so many years from high school, I struggled with this idea that I will never be good enough unless I match that, or unless I'm better than that. It took me a long time to realize that I'm good enough. I don't have to be better than so-and-so. I have to be who God created me to be. Sometimes we have to wrestle. Sometimes we have to do battle with ourselves before we can actually come to this realization. There's an ancient saying that comes from, it says Socrates. It might have even been older than this, but the saying is, know thyself. I mean, this has been an ancient problem. Too often we try to live our lives being somebody else, desiring to be somebody else, when really what makes us whole is to just be who God created us to be real, to be authentic to that destiny. So, I think as I wrap this up, the idea is that I pray that each of us may come to know who we are, who God created us to be, to live to that purpose, to not be somebody else, but to be me. This will bring us joy and fulfillment and life. That's all I have. Questions?
Did Esau know what happened over the past 20 years?
He did not.
I didn't read it.
They didn't have social media back then. No Facebook, yeah. No, he had no clue. And Jacob didn't have any clue of what was happening in Esau's life either. Right? As far as he was concerned, the last thing he remembers of Esau was a threat of death. Okay? That's it.
I wonder how much Esau pondered over his threat. Like, over those years. Like, this is the last thing I told my brother.
I think that's what Jacob was thinking. Or was Esau the type of person who, out of sight, out of mind? Jacob's gone, I forgot about it all. Right? He's quick-tempered, but quick to forget as well. Yeah. Quick to forgive.
Why did Esau bring 400 men?
Good question. I don't know. Maybe he didn't know who Laban was coming back with too. Laban had a lot of people too. Maybe Esau didn't know what the deal was. Remember, there's no communication. I don't know. Good question. It's interesting. What was the blessing that Jacob got from Isaac?
That's what I want to go back and look at, because one of the last things it says about Esau is that he despised his birthright. Mm-hmm. So partly what you're suggesting is 20 years later, he says, I have enough, meaning I'm whole. So he's experienced restoration of a different kind, which is kind of at the bottom line of all this.
Right. And he recognizes at this point, right, the blessing wasn't for me because he did it deceptively, right? The whole idea with faces and all this stuff, I mean, this is throughout the story, so you see the faces. And how did Jacob get the blessing from Isaac? How did he deceive him? Dressing up like him, he smelled like him, he gave him food, right? These are all senses. What was the one sense that Isaac didn't have? Couldn't see his face. Right? Faces are all over this story, right? And so Isaac blesses him, and he gives him the blessing that he thinks is for Esau, right? But this isn't the blessing that he needs. In fact, I missed it myself as I was going through this, and I came across as I was studying this. There was actually a second blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob. Did you catch that? The second blessing is when he's about to leave and Isaac knows you're Jacob. And he gives him a second blessing. What is it? Read it.
It just says he hated him again right before he dies, you mean?
No. At the very beginning. This is chapter 28, 14. 28:14. Right before Jacob leaves.
Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, the north, the south, and in you and in your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
That gives me chills. Whose blessing is that? Abraham's. Do you notice the difference between the two blessings? The blessing that he thought he gave to Esau was one of power and of wealth. The one that he gives to Jacob, when he really knows it's Jacob, is what? The Abrahamic blessing. You will carry this covenant on. Why doesn't he give that to Esau? Why does he give Esau a blessing of power and money and this other stuff, but he gives Jacob the covenant blessing? Why does he do that?
Because Jacob was more worthy of it. He knew that.
Because he knew his children. He knew Esau and he knew Jacob. Which is a problem that most kids struggle with in our life, right? We try to compare ourselves to, and we like to be like our brother, and we're always concerned about the parent loving one or the other, or am I not getting enough, because my sister or my brother or whatever, right? When the parents, you can't raise you exactly the same because you're different, right? And how many times have you probably heard this if you're a sibling that you're not like your brother? So I'm going to treat you differently than I'm going to treat your brother. I'm going to raise you differently than my brother. I'm going to give you things differently because I know you.
But question is, this is what's happening in this circumstance is that he's having a dream, and isn't it God that comes to him and gives him that promise, that covenant blessing?
In 28?
28.
Before he leaves? Or is it Isaac or God?
Talking about in 28 verse 14 is where God is actually speaking to him in his dream.
Maybe I wrote that down wrong. Hang on.
Isn't it at the end of the story that when Isaac is ready to pass on? He actually gives Jacob the blessing that he was going to give.
I don't know, because then I went back to 27:39 to read that one.
Let's see.
I don't know. I'll have to go back.
Only one blessing.
Maybe I wrote that down as his father, as the God. Then Jacob left Beersheba. Yeah. I don't know. I'll come back to that. I'll clarify that. That's a good question.
Well, I think it's a definitely see his humanness in the story, and
Jacob's?
and even he carries with him the covenant of God. I mean, his people will become Israel. His whole family will become. I mean, that's huge. But at the same time, here's the whole story just brings out his humanness and the idea of his struggle with God and man, God and the people around him, which is something that we all struggle with. And we all struggle, probably, I would say, at one time or another in our lives with identifying with who am I? Who am I really? Am I, do I want to be exactly like my parents? Do I want to move on? Do I want to own something? What does my relationship with God mean to me? Is it what my parents told me, or is it, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
It's so much more than that.
Well, that's why we say, life is gray, right? It's not black and white. It's not just follow this, what God says, and everything will be all right. I mean, what does he say? You're going to struggle with man, but you're also going to struggle with God. You know, if we are followers in this family, if we're adopted into this family, I mean, we should struggle with God. Like, it won't be easy. We'll have questions. We'll be like, why is this? But it doesn't say that you'll have all the answers, Jacob. You'll struggle with God, but you'll hold on to him and he will hold on to you.
And Israel does exactly that.
Right.
They never stop struggling.
Never stop struggling.
Is that, when he's talking about wrestling, I mean, is that a physical thing, or is that a metaphor for he's wrestling himself, or, because if there's no Facebook or social media, how does he know, or how will everybody else know that he changed his name to Israel?
He just, yeah.
Like, did he wrestle with that with himself all night? Because there's nights where I toss, and I feel like I wrestled
Right.
before.
Sure.
In the story, he's limping the next day.
Yeah.
Which is something I looked up because, I mean, was it a physical wrestling match? And as I was looking this up, I also found, different psychologists that said in dreams or in a psychosomatic place, you can actually come out of this with a physical ailment.
Right.
So it could have been, he's in this dream state, he's wrestling with he's just, wrestling all night, as you were just saying, with himself. It could have been a person. It could have been an angel. I think it's Hosea that says it's an angel that he wrestles with. There's another passage where it's he's wrestling with God. I mean, the story's not clear.
If he's just wrestling with himself.
If we try to just look at the story, it sounds like he's wrestling with himself, but God's there. God's in the midst of this wrestling match.
So how will everybody else realize or know that he changed his name to Israel?
That's a great question. How do people know without social media, Lindley, that you have changed your life?
By the way you act.
Good. That's right. We can tell people my name is different. We can tell people I'm different. I'm a different person. But how do people really know? By how you live. Oh, gosh. Wait. That's funny. What's the front cover? Oh, wait. That's to live, right? It's the whole point. The whole point is that our life should be different, that people notice. I can say I'm a Christian all day long, and I struggled with this identity. I'm a Christian. I remember, I'll never forget. I was working at a job, and I told a person I was a Christian. I was going to church, and he looked at me like, you're a Christian. Like, he was baffled. And when he said that, like, all of these thoughts over the past week of my words, my actions, my lifestyle, it was like Jacob from last week. It was just like confronting, like, crap. I know why he's asking me this. Because everything that I say doesn't match up with anything that I do. It was like a ton of bricks just hitting me with one question. Really?
What do you think, like, Moses writing Genesis, like, after he changed his name, like, they continue to use Jacob instead of Israel?
I was going to say that. It's a good question, right? Because they don't have social media to tell everybody, maybe. Or maybe because maybe Jacob still struggles with that himself. I mean, maybe we still struggle every day with, I know who I'm supposed to be, but I still fall back into these old patterns.
I think there's a way to read the passage we read today of Jacob still trying to scheme and plot.
Sure.
No, you keep it. No, my kids are weak. My flock is weak. We can't go with you now. No, please
Sure.
don't leave anybody. We're fine where we are. You go ahead. We'll meet you later. And he never meets.
Yeah. I think to answer your question, I think we may know the truth of how we're supposed to live, but we don't fully live it out instantaneously. It takes many years for him to maybe fulfill the idea of who he truly is. He knows who he's supposed to be, but who he actually is and lives that out takes time.
I guess, if you look at other people like Saul and Paul, it seems like that was a definite change in his life whenever they changed the name. Like, I don't know, because after that point in the Bible, they used Paul the rest of the time.
That's not because of that, though. That's a different reason, I think. I don't think it's because he converted or anything like that. Because he's still called Saul in other places, but it has to do with his location of where he's at, not necessarily because of his belief system.
Not because of identity change?
I don't think that he's called Saul and Paul because of his identity has changed. No. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think if we go back in the stories, and if we go back to the Acts story where we taught for 18 months, if you remember that, we had like 2 weeks on I think that whole idea of where that came from, and Paul is somebody that, that's another sermon, but there's a lot to that other than just the fact that, because his name doesn't change right away, it changes when he's out somewhere, right, at a different location.
I guess one thing that makes me still question I don't know, well, two things, about the number thing. You said 7s and 3s,
right,
which actually mean, their meaning is wholeness and completion, right? So throughout the story when we see these 7s and 3s, there's a hint right there of what the underlying,
meaning to the story, right? Right.
Meaning of it. But one thing I've always wondered too is there seems to be like a whole lot more detail than necessary right at the end of it, where Esau's insisting, "Come with me," and Jacob is saying, "No, we'll go there and then we'll meet you," blah blah blah, and he never meets him. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So it seems like, okay, I guess part of me was like, if there is true healing and reconciliation in the relationship, well then why wouldn't there also be, but maybe that's not what we need to look at, before.
Mm-mm.
It's not usually that simple though, right?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Like, feel good about it today, but tomorrow when I wake up, it's like, was it, it takes a still process. Yeah. I don't know anyone who's perfect after a moment of.
Right.
No, but that could be like, we talked about the punch to the face. I don't know.
That was last week, yeah.
That could have been like Jacob's punch to the face.
Mm-hmm.
The start of this change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how, other than I think living consciously about that and about I'm supposed to be the way that God created me to be, is there anything else that you can do other than just having that mindset? Is it accountability? I'd imagine it's accountability with other people, holding me to the standard, but then that punch in the face, I don't know if this is a silly question, but I end up asking when that punch in the face can happen for me? Do I make that happen, or do I just wait for some kind of magical day? I don't know. Is that a silly question? Stupid question. But I mean, right, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like I don't
Everybody's
know how
punch-
to change myself.
Right. Everybody's punch in the face can be different. Some people it's serious, you get hit hard. Some people it might just be a conviction. It might just be a recognition why do I act this way? This is dumb. Right? Everybody's different, and a lot of it I think has a lot to do with the way you're raised. Depending on your parents and the culture and the community that you grow up in, it might be different than somebody, like myself, who I didn't grow up in a culture that was around God. I grew up, with a lot of people who didn't believe in God. I grew up with a lot of people who chased girls and drank and smoked pot and all kinds of stuff, and that was the community that I was a part of, and I thought that was normal, right? And so something had to shake me, something had to wake me up multiple times, in fact, not just once, like Jacob. I had to get shaken a few times. And it's been a journey of continually they were big in the beginning, but even still to this day, I have these little moments of why am I still struggling with this?
I think there's a bunch of jabs.
That's a good way to put it. Sometimes that violent hook we need, but then it's just jab, jab, jab after that, yeah. That's good.
It's cool too, because I was thinking about the whole punch idea. I was thinking about why people tend to just fall back into what they used to do, because I catch myself doing that sometimes. When you look in the Bible, people in the Bible,
sure,
the church. From the beginning, having all the letters and stuff, having that, and I think it's difficult to get out of the swing of what you're comfortable in.
Sure.
You've done this from for so long, and you're having to start fresh. You're starting to follow God and to follow Him with your life, and you're trying to do certain things, but sometimes I feel like, especially in my walk with God and how I go about viewing things and seeing things, sometimes my mind wants to force me to go back to something that I know just it's not right, but it's comfortable. And I keep coming back, and then trying better to jump out of that. But yeah, I don't know. I think it had a lot to do with this is where I'm comfortable. This is where I'm confident.
Right.
This is where I can say what I say and just
Well, doesn't the Master say that we are to pick up our cross daily?
Yeah, it's true.
Right? What does that metaphor symbolize? Right? What physically happened to Jacob in this process? Trauma, physical trauma, right? To change is difficult. To follow on this walk, this idea of constantly we backslide, we fall back, or we do something wrong, right? It's hard, right? And sometimes that backsliding gets us in trouble. Sometimes it's I can't believe I just did that. And now look at the problem that I've caused because of it, right? We don't recognize as we're doing this the consequences of our actions sometimes. Sometimes it's what's in secret, it's in hiding. But sometimes it's just an old habit that you're comfortable doing and you do it and you're like, oh, crap, look what I just did, right? Now people look at you and they're judging you. Now maybe the things that happened created other problems that took place as well, right? Because of this backslide, right? Every day it's a battle. You pick up your cross every day because it's hard. It's a struggle, right? It's a struggle to say, nope, I'm not doing that anymore. No, I'm not going to partake in that. It's hard.
I think sometimes we have the wrong view of progression too. We think that this is the point where we're at, and this is the point where we need to be, so we just work until we get to that point. But how we grow as individuals in things outside of spiritual, as far as just being physically more fit, or the other day me and Briar were talking about I personally wanted to be able to work more. Work more through my week without getting as tired. And we were kind of talking about marathons and what it takes to get to that point. And I never done anything that Briar's done, but just running cross country and things like that. But it's a common understanding that if you want to be able to run a certain amount, then in practice you run further.
Right.
So when you take a step back, you realize that you have grown, but in order to get to a point, you actually have to continue.
Sure.
So it's more like two steps forward, one step back, two steps forward. And I think so many times we take a step back and we're like, oh man, we're failing. But and it's not that we shouldn't continue to push and go forward, but sometimes we have to take that step back to remember we need to keep going. We need to keep pushing. And it's less about failing. It's less about missing your mark, and it's more about the discipline to get up and keep going forward.
And that's why I like the idea of the biblical idea of sin. In the Christian paradigm, sin is this awful thing, you're going to hell. But in the biblical mindset, sin is it's missing the mark, hata, right? It's you made a mistake. What do we do with a mistake? We learn from it, right? I don't want to say sin is a good thing, but sometimes sin is necessary for us to hit the mark next.
Paul says that.
Right? We have to do these things, and we look at failure as this bad thing, this horrible thing. Don't fail. Whatever you do, don't fail. But sometimes we need to fail so that we can get better. Because sometimes we just get complacent when we're just always good. Right? And then when we're good, we stop taking risks. And we stop taking risks, we become complacent, and then we die. Right? All right. Anybody else?
That's a good way to end.
All right. Don't be complacent. That's right. All right. Good night.